criminal defense attorney Ryan Pasiga, and I'm going to talk about a third-degree murder charge. And lately what's been happening in Minnesota is more and more people have been charged with third-degree murder for distributing drugs to others. And the way this is working is, let's say I'm a drug dealer and I sell them to Joe. And then Joe sells them to Adam, and Adam gives the drugs to his girlfriend, and girlfriend overdoses and dies as a result of the drugs that she got from her boyfriend. I have never met her boyfriend and I have never met her, yet they come all the way back up the chain and they charge me with murder. And that's what's been going on. And typically in these cases, if somebody pleads guilty or is found guilty of those charges, they're generally receiving prison sentences of somewhere between 7 and 10 years of prison if they do not have a prior criminal history. If they've got other criminal history, they might even be doing more time than that. So generally what the law, these cases are charged out is that prosecutors will allege that somebody aids and abets in the murder in the third degree of somebody that overdosed on these drugs. And in Minnesota, that's called liability of crimes for another. And the specific elements that are read to a jury if a case goes to a trial on these third-degree murder charges are first what is called murder in the third degree defined. And what those statutes say that are read to a jury is that whoever by directly or indirectly, unlawfully selling, giving away, bartering, which means trading, delivering, exchanging, distributing, which means giving away, or administering any drug without intent to cause a death, but yet that drug even proximately causes the death of another human being, is guilty of third-degree murder. And so what that means is if somebody is ingesting or taking other drugs in combination, let's say they overdose on acid or something like that, and if they were also having cocaine that night and marijuana and maybe some prescription pills that they didn't have a prescription for, yet they overdose, and even if the acid is part of what caused them to overdose and die, they're still charging this as a murder, and the law may support a conviction for that. It depends on the facts of the case. So that's number one that's read to a jury. The other part of it is what's called the elements of the crime. And the elements mean the ingredients of a crime that the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury. If they have to prove all of the elements of a crime for someone to be found guilty. So if there are 5 elements and the jury agrees that the prosecutor has proven 4 beyond a reasonable doubt, but not the 5th one, that there's some question about the 5th one, then they'll return a not guilty verdict because you have to prove all 5 elements beyond a reasonable doubt. The first element of these third-degree controlled substance murder charges are that the death must be proven. Second is that the defendant, whoever's on trial, was the proximate cause of the person's death by directly or indirectly, and that's where we get down that chain of distribution, unlawfully either selling, giving away, so they don't have to profit from this, bartering, delivering, exchanging, distributing, or administering, which means literally giving it to them like an injection or something, by administering that drug to the person that died. The proximate cause, here's what that word means, is something that had a substantial part in bringing about the death, either directly and immediately, or through happenings to follow one after the other. So let's say somebody ODs on a drug and they go into cardiac arrest. They have a heart attack, or they go into a coma, or they start seizing, and they don't die right at the scene. They're taken to the hospital and they die a week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, whatever. The law still supports the idea that they can be charged with this third-degree murder. The question for the jury in that situation would be whether that was a substantial part in bringing about the death, and that's one of the defenses to these crimes. The third element, the third ingredient, is that it happened in whatever county that you're charged in, and that's usually not an issue in a case. So really the big issue is that the death was caused by these drugs, and that the person, if they're not the person who directly gave the drugs to them, but that this person was indeed in this chain of distribution for the drugs. So from a defense standpoint on these cases, one of the things we look at is whether this drug is actually outlawed as a drug. Some drugs are not on the federal schedule of Schedule 1 or Schedule 2, and if those drugs aren't named on that schedule, then the drug may not be illegal even if it caused the death, and if it's not an illegal drug, then there's a defense that this is an illegal drug. A second challenge to these cases is whether there's even enough probable cause to believe that the person in this alleged distribution chain really was one of the people that distributed the drugs, gave them away, or anything like that. So that's a defense as well. And then obviously the third one is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Now that would go to a trial, to a jury, of course, which is different than a probable cause challenge. But these cases are defensible. Finally, if somebody has done something like this and they never intended anybody to die, certainly that's usually the case, of course, and sometimes even innocent teenagers, that get caught up in sharing or experimenting with some drugs, never imagined in the world that they would later be charged with a murder case and something's gone awry. Then we're looking at sometimes what's called mitigation, which means helping the sentence at the end of the case if somebody decides to plead to that or a lower charge. And there have been cases, where we've been able to mitigate very, very serious cases and avoid people going to prison. So that's another way that these cases can come out. Each case is its own unique item, but when you're looking for a lawyer to handle a case like this, you want to make sure that they have experience in defending these third-degree drug distribution cases. If you have additional questions, my name is Ryan Pasiga. You can find me at arrestedminnesota.com or call me at 612-339-5844.